The rideshare bubble has burst. Uber and Lyft are dead. These are my final words on the subject. Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sticking with me through this, well, a little bit of an extended hiatus. Now, this was not the video you were supposed to be seeing today. That video will be seen Friday, and yes, you are fully free to comment when that video comes out how this video is going to completely contradict some of the jokes in that video. Truthfully, I felt that I had said the last words on this subject. And in some ways I have. But here's the thing. I've been known as the Uber and Lyft guy for a very long time. And even though some people claim that my channel has become irrelevant, the bottom line is for the last 5 to 6 years, I don't know how long it's been, I think it's been 5, I have remained a constant presence in this rideshare community, whether you like me or not, whether you think what I do is relevant or not. I've been here, I've stuck it out. Even when I've threatened to quit this topic, I've come back. And when I do non-Uber and Lyft topics, people remind me how much better I was when I was doing these topics. And some people even speculate that I'll be back doing this topic. I will come back to Uber and Lyft. I don't know if this video actually has them winning that bet right now. I'll let you guys decide that. But I did kind of realize that even though the channel is still going to be called the Apptrepreneur, it's not changing its name. And even though I'm still going to be having a schedule, the reality is I have been the Uber and Lyft guy for a very long time. I mean, I think right now the only person who's been doing it longer than me is Harry Campbell. And because, Randy Shear got out of this a long time ago and showed exactly why you should get out of this if you want to continue to succeed on YouTube. I think Dustin is still around, and I don't think he has any plans on throwing in the towel, so whoever had driving with Dustin as the reigning champ of the rideshare wars in terms of YouTubers or UberTubers, he or Mark will probably win that one. But I do kind of realize, well, I didn't realize this. I kind of was inspired a few minutes ago as I read this article for Uber and Lyft, the rideshare bubble bursts. And this article was, I think I got halfway through the article before I realized this is it, and I just accidentally clicked the OBS thing. How's that for like a, there you go, that's the, whatever, I won't edit it out. But I read this article, and I realized that this article has to be my swan song on this channel. This is the article that totally justifies why I'm walking away from rideshare and not coming back. Now, in all fairness, I already made a video explaining why I'm not coming back to rideshare, but some people felt that might have been a little mean-spirited, or they might think that I'm just being bitter about losing the rideshare crown to other UberTubers, and that's really not the reality. The reality is that Uber and Lyft have gone so far downhill that there's not a whole lot of reason to continue to talk about them. Now, some of this will be repeated on Friday, and you might even get a better sense of why I personally, on an emotional level, need to just move on from this topic. But Greg Bessinger of the New York Times wrote this wonderful opinion piece that I think highlights that the reasons why I think Uber and Lyft have just always been a big lie, and that there's really no reason to continue pretending like they're going to be anything in this world. There's no reason to continue to pretend that they are going to be a significant player in the world. Heck, you've got PBS making videos about them, basically saying that Uber and Lyft are basically paying their way to play, but they're not actually contributing to society, and they are not making money, and maybe they need to start doing that if they want to start bragging about how they're changing the industry. So, let's read this opinion piece, because I think he worded it better than I could. And we will discuss what it means. And the article is simply titled, "For Uber and Lyft, the rideshare bubble bursts. Piece by piece, the mythology around ride-sharing is falling apart. Uber and Lyft promised ubiquitous self-driving cars as soon as this year. This is 2021. I think they technically said they were going to arrive by last year, but we'll give them a year break because of that whole COVID thing. They promised an end to private car ownership. They promised to reduce congestion in the largest cities. They promised consistently affordable rides. They promised to boost public transit use. They promised profitable business models. They promised a surfeit of well-paying jobs. Heck, they even promised flying cars in my very public but mostly good-natured dispute with the YouTuber formerly known as Uberman. That was a topic of discussion. Well, none of that has gone as promised, but more about that later. Now a new study is punching a hole in another of Uber and Lyft's promised benefits: curtailing pollution. The companies have long insisted their services are a boon to the environment, in part because they reduce the need for short trips, can pool riders heading in roughly the same direction, and cut unnecessary miles by, for instance, eliminating the need to look for street parking. It turns out that Uber rides do spare the air from the high amount of pollutants emitted from starting up a cold vehicle when it is operating less efficiently, researchers from Carnegie Mellon University found. But that gain is wiped out by the need for drivers to circle around waiting for or fetching their passenger, known as deadheading. Deadheading, Lyft and Uber estimated in 2019, is equal to about 40% of rideshare miles driven in 6 American cities. The researchers at Carnegie Mellon estimated that driving without a passenger leads to a roughly 20% overall increase in fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions compared to trips made by personal vehicles. The researchers also found that switching from a private car to on-demand rides like Uber or Lyft increased the external costs of a typical trip by 30 to 35%, or roughly 35 cents on the average, because of the added congestion, collisions, and noise from rideshare services. Quote, "This burden is not carried by the individual user, but rather impacts the surrounding community," reads a summary of the research conducted by Jacob Ward, Jeremy McCulloch, and Konstantin Samaras. Society as a whole currently shoulders these external costs in the form of increased mortality risks, damage to vehicles and infrastructure, climate impacts, and increased traffic congestion. But as Lyft would have it, quote, "By using Lyft to share rides, passengers are helping to reduce the carbon footprint left by our country's dominant mode of transportation, driving alone." That's what the friendly Uber alternative claimed way back in 2016. So what about all those other pledges? They've proved to be just as illusory. Take Uber congestion. Uber and Lyft envisioned a future in which software algorithms would push each car to host 3 or more passengers, easing traffic and providing a complement to the public transit options. Instead, passengers have largely eschewed pooled rides and public transit in favor of private trips, leading to downtown bottlenecks in cities like San Francisco. I'm going to add that drivers also forego Uber pools because they really don't make them any money. The duration of traffic jams increased by nearly 5% in urban areas since Uber and Lyft moved in. Lyft's president, John Zimmer, once claimed the majority of rides would be in autonomous vehicles by 2021, but the company has largely backed away from its self-driving efforts, including selling its development unit to a Toyota subsidiary this year. Uber, which once characterized robot cars as existential to its future, sold off its autonomous vehicle division last year after mounting safety and cost concerns, aka the damn things weren't working. The efficiencies of ride-hailing were supposed to all but end car ownership. Instead, vehicle sales are on the rise again this year, after a down year in 2020. There is also evidence that Uber and Lyft may actually spur an increase in car sales in cities where they begin operating. Public transit in some areas, despite the company's claims, has been waning, according to several studies, as more consumers opt to jump in Ubers and Lyfts that drive them door to door. That was before the COVID pandemic spooked users into staying away from crowded subway cars and buses. Underwritten by venture capital, Uber and Lyft hooked users by offering artificially cheap rides that often undercut traditional yellow cabs. But labor shortages and a desperate need to find some path to a profitable future have caused rideshare prices to skyrocket, perhaps to a more rational level, of which drivers are not making any more money, just Uber and Lyft. You might notice that I make comments frequently during this article about the drivers, and it's for a simple reason. This article largely ignores the drivers, so I want to clue in some of the other blind spots on why rideshare is just a huge failure. After burning through billions of venture capital dollars, Uber said it was on a path to profitability last year using an accounting metric that ignores many of the costs that actually make it unprofitable. Sounds a lot like Enron, doesn't it? By the same measure, Chief Executive Dara Khosrowshahi is projecting this quarter could be profitable. That remains to be seen. Sure, the pandemic had an outsized impact on ride-sharing, but even though food delivery helped prop up Uber's results, the company still lost a staggering $6.8 billion last year, following $8.5 billion in 2019 losses in supposedly better times. Lyft hasn't fared much better, racking up $4.4 billion in combined losses over the same period. Despite the hype for the company's stock market debuts, some Lyft investors are still underwater more than 2 years later, while Uber stockholders have eked out meager gains, hardly winning business models. It is tempting to chalk much of this up to marketing and typical corporate chest thumping. But the companies skirted laws for years to help drive growth, and along the way have made drivers pawns in their race to the bottom. And something just fell. I am sorry about that. We are not going to worry about that right now, though. Displeased by a California law that would grant drivers employment status and guaranteed benefits, Uber and Lyft teamed up with DoorDash and other gig companies. They forked over more than $200 million to back a ballot measure that all but ensured thousands of workers would never gain the dignity of a consistent living wage, ostensibly to help safeguard the company's not quite thriving business models. A state judge has called the law unconstitutional. Now, despite the cynicism of the California fight, Lyft and Uber are trying to foist a similar law upon Massachusetts with the promise of, quote, historic new benefits for, quote, app-based rideshare and delivery drivers. Voters shouldn't fall for it, especially if, knock on wood, they were watching my channel during that whole debacle, and if they saw what Uber was doing after the law was passed. The companies are correct that they offer a useful service, including food delivery to the homebound, an alternative to drunken driving, and access to transportation in underserved areas. But after years of bluster, it's hard to believe them about much else. And I think that's just pretty much the great final word to have on this whole subject. Uber and Lyft broke every conceivable promise that they made. They did absolutely everything wrong. They started out with a radical idea and they didn't know how to make money from it. They never did. And all the times when we were making money, us drivers, which I know I have not been a driver a while, but I was still a driver, guess what? We continued to get screwed. Really, there's only one thing that Uber and Lyft did correct, in my opinion. And I'm sure some of you will definitely respond and you will comment how you feel this is way off the mark. I honestly think the only thing they did right, though, was make a bunch of you witless sheep. And you know, I hate to use that term because the term sheep has been used against people who are simply following science about a very public health crisis and actually following rules that are not unreasonable to follow. But I use this term now because these Uber sheep, as I'm going to call them, absolutely refuse to quit Uber and Lyft. They will just drive and drive because they have convinced themselves, or maybe they have let Uber and Lyft convince them, that there is nothing else for them to do. There's no better opportunity out there. There's no future prospects. You don't even like getting up at 8 in the morning to go to a 9-to-5 job that you're going to hate yourself for. So you know what? Keep driving for us. Keep being your quote-unquote own boss, even though you're losing money, and in many cases, you're behind on your rent, and you're underwater on your car payment. Keep driving for us because you want to be your own boss, right? Don't let the world tell you that this is a bad idea. They're just jealous because you are your own boss. I find it a little sad, and I just couldn't in good conscience be a part of it anymore. But when you ignore the drivers themselves, what has Uber Lyft accomplished? Their IPOs? Total busts. You know, the flying car? Never happened. Self-driving vehicles? There's people who have been subscribed to me for years who I remember having debates with in the comment section that the driving cars, or I should say the self-driving cars, would be here by 2021. How it's like, hey, they need to be at like a level 6. They're at level 3. It's just around the corner. And now nobody talks about them anymore. Nobody. Because it was all smokescreen. It was a way to get Google and Apple and all these companies more investment dollars to prop up their stock value. They're creating the future right here, and then they quietly cancel the projects because they're just not possible. I mean, maybe in 10, 15 years, who knows? I mean, science has definitely improved quite a bit in a short amount of time, but for the most part, no, this is not going to happen. And they have not taken away people's need to own a car. They have not cleared up the freeways. They have contributed to pollution. And as PBS points out, and I think the show's called Our 2 Cents or something like that, you should look it up. Uber and Lyft, the only reason they're part of the Big Boys Club is because they're willing to pay lots of money and lose lots of money to be in that club. And guess what? If in some people in SoCal might appreciate this analogy, you can pay to have the premium pass at Disneyland. It doesn't mean you can afford it. It doesn't mean that debt on paying for that stupid $2,000+ pass, will not eventually catch up with you. You can pay for that premium pass and act like you're rich because you go to Disneyland all the time. But you know where that comes from? It comes from your gas money. It comes from your food money. I know a family to this day, they have lived comfortably, I will admit, and every year there's a debate of what to do to save for money, to make the budget go further. Every year the husband casually brings up, maybe we should cancel the Disneyland passes for a year. Maybe we should cancel the Disneyland passes for a year. We don't really need it, and it would save so much money. The wife doesn't hesitate. She says you can cut the food budget, you can cut the gas budget, you can cancel a streaming service, you can send our kids, who at the time were in college, less money so that they can eat themselves. You can cut whatever you want, but you will never get rid of that Disneyland pass. That's where the Uber drivers are right now. They have every opportunity to get a better job. They have every opportunity to better themselves. But at the end of the day, I want to be my own boss. I don't want to do a 9-to-5. So it doesn't matter how much this costs me. I will never give up being an Uber and Lyft driver. And you know what? If you feel that way, okay. I guess there's nothing more to say from my end. I think I have made a very good argument for getting out of this. I have made a very good argument that these are not companies you want to do business with. I have made the most compelling argument anyone could make, honestly. And even some of my, they're not really competition anymore, but Chad the Gig Economist, he recently did like a little rideshare binge to get a bonus, did very well for himself, and afterwards he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I don't know how people can do rideshare. There's just nowhere near enough money. Food delivery is much more profitable. And even the food delivery is becoming less profitable because of $3 delivery orders. And the fact that, like Uber and Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, Instacarts, they're always cutting their wages. You know, I want to build a business. I want to make more money year after year, not less. And as I will explain in Friday's video, I also want to talk about things that make me happy, of which this does not bring joy. Do you think a company that inspires an article like this, you think this is a company that's good for you? You think this is a company that's going to bring you joy and happiness? I don't think so. I think you need to get out of it. Granted, this is not news. This is not new. This is what I felt for a while. But I am finally going to take that step. I kind of felt like I'd already said the final word on Rideshare, but when I saw this article, I knew that this was just the perfect bow on top of it. Now, will I absolutely never talk about Rideshare again? I'm not going to commit to that. Uber and Lyft might actually go bankrupt. That would be something worth talking about. What if Dara Khosrowshahi quits? What the heck, for old time's sakes? I'll talk about that. But you're going to be seeing a very different Apptrepreneur going forward. You're going to be seeing a different style of video. You're going to be seeing a different style of content. And I hope you stick around and check it out, because here's the thing, even though it's not Rideshare related, hopefully the videos will be able to give people who are still stuck in this cycle of Rideshare and just being dependent on this absolutely horrendous service. Maybe you can start seeing things, maybe start getting ideas, maybe start getting advice again on how you can better your life, and you can do it absolutely without these companies. For me, the Rideshare bubble burst a long time ago, but now the world is realizing it as well. I was a little wrong about them not being around in 5 years, but give them a few more years, we might still see them buckle just yet. Anyway, folks, I'm going to eschew the normal ending because I don't want to say subscribe when we're basically ending an era on this channel. I don't want to say subscribe. Like, if this is the video that you like because you're interested in Rideshare, I don't want to say subscribe because, you know, you're not going to be coming back for that. But here's what I will say, since we are bringing this to an end. This is a very big end for the Apptrepreneur era. And I kind of said this last time, but I was a little cynical about it, but I want to be a little bit more genuine. For those who joined me on this long journey, thank you so much for making the channel what it is. Thank you so much for giving me the freedom to make money doing this. And thank you so much for the wonderful comments that you've left. I know most of you will probably move on. That can't be helped. You know, people subscribe to channels for specific reasons, and when the channel changes, usually the audience doesn't go with them. But I do thank you all for joining. Hopefully you'll consider continuing. But what's that famous quote from the Truman Show? In case I don't see you again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Have a good one. Take care.